In May of 1973, two children exploring a quiet meadow on England's Isle of Wight claimed they encountered something extraordinary. Not a ghost, not quite a person, and certainly nothing they had ever seen before. According to their account, they came face to face with a 7-foot-tall figure dressed in bright colours, who introduced himself simply as All Colours Sam. What followed would become one of the strangest and most debated encounters in British paranormal history. The event took place near the seaside town of Sandown, close to the local airport and the rolling grassland of the Sandown golf links. Just beyond the manicured greens sat a marshy stretch of meadow known as Lake Common, cut through by narrow brooks and wooden footbridges. In the early 1970s, it was quiet countryside, the sort of place where children could wander freely on a warm spring afternoon without anyone giving it much thought. That day, two children were doing exactly that. 7-year-old Faye and a boy known only as Harry were walking through the meadow when they suddenly heard something strange drifting across the field. Faye later described the sound as a kind of wailing noise, similar to an ambulance siren, but somehow different. It rose and fell in an odd rhythm and seemed to echo across the marshland from somewhere ahead of them. Curious, the children followed the sound toward a small wooden bridge that crossed one of the streams cutting through the meadow. As they approached the bridge, the strange noise suddenly stopped. Then something appeared from beneath it. According to the children, a blue-gloved hand slowly rose into view from the water's edge. Moments later, a tall figure emerged from beneath the bridge itself. The children said the being stood roughly 7 feet tall and moved in an awkward, almost mechanical way. Its limbs appeared stiff, almost as if they were made from wooden slats rather than flesh and bone. Its head seemed to sit directly on its shoulders with no visible neck. What struck them most, however, was its face. They described it as completely white, not pale in the way a person might be pale, but paper white, almost like a mask. Its lips were bright yellow, yet when the figure later spoke, the children insisted that the lips never moved. The figure's clothing was just as unusual as its appearance. It wore a pointed yellow hat topped with a small black knob. Thin rod-like protrusions extended from the sides of the hat, almost like antennae. Around its shoulders sat a red collar attached to a bright green tunic worn over white trousers. Blue gloves covered its hands, and when the children looked more closely, they noticed something unsettling. The figure appeared to have only 3 fingers on each hand. Even its feet looked strange, reportedly showing only 3 toes. At first, the children were frightened, but the being did not behave aggressively. Instead, it seemed curious, almost friendly in its own peculiar way. In its hand was what appeared to be a small microphone attached to a cable. When it spoke, its voice seemed to project through the device rather than coming naturally from its mouth. At one point, the figure pointed toward a book or sign containing large writing. The children read the words aloud. "Hello, and I am All Colours Sam." It was a bizarre introduction, but it allowed the children to begin speaking with the strange figure rather than running away. Over the next half hour or so, Faye and Harry reportedly held a conversation with Sam. The being asked them simple questions about their lives, where they lived, and why they had come to the meadow. But when the children tried to learn more about him, his answers were vague and confusing. When Faye asked if he was a ghost, Sam reportedly replied, "Well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way." He also told them he was not a man, and claimed he was all alone. However, he hinted that there were others like him somewhere else, and suggested he had a base on the mainland. The answers raised more questions than they solved. At some point during the encounter, Sam invited the children into a small structure nearby. Standing in the meadow was a windowless metallic hut that looked, from the outside, like a simple storage shed or temporary building site hut. But when the children stepped inside, something felt immediately wrong. According to their account, the interior seemed larger than the exterior structure should have allowed. The hut contained 2 levels connected by a ladder. The floor appeared metallic, and the walls were decorated with repeating patterns that looked strangely like rows of dials or instruments. Despite this almost technological appearance, the furnishings inside were oddly primitive. There were simple wooden chairs, an electric heater, and even a small fire burning inside. The environment felt like an attempt to imitate a normal room, but one that had been assembled by someone who didn't quite understand how ordinary human spaces worked. One of the strangest moments came when Sam performed what the children later described as a trick. He picked up a small berry from outside and placed it into his ear. Then, after jerking his head forward, the berry seemed to disappear entirely before suddenly reappearing at his eye. Repeating the motion again, the berry appeared to travel from his eye to his mouth. Whether this was a clever illusion or something more unusual, the children couldn't say. But the moment shifted the atmosphere of the encounter from something frightening to something strangely playful. The entire interaction reportedly lasted between 30 and 45 minutes. Throughout the conversation, Sam remained curious but never clearly explained what he was or why he was there. Eventually, the children left the hut and returned home, unsure of what they had just experienced. When Faye told her father what had happened, he was initially skeptical, but something about her story stood out. The level of detail was unusual, and the fact that another child had witnessed the same event made it harder to dismiss outright. Faye's father, who later became known publicly only as Mr. Y, decided to look into the matter further. He briefly spoke with Harry before the boys' family left the island and found that the key details of their accounts matched. Believing the incident deserved to be recorded, he reported the story to the British UFO Research Association, also known as BUFORA. The case was eventually published in 1978 under the curious title Ghost or Spaceman. Even investigators struggled to classify what the children had described. The figure did not resemble the standard alien archetypes commonly reported during the UFO wave of the 1970s, nor did it fit comfortably into categories like ghost sightings or cryptid encounters. Instead, the Sandown entity seemed to sit somewhere in between, a strange blend of mechanical, biological, and theatrical features that made the entire story feel deeply surreal. Adding to the mystery was the fact that two workmen were reportedly working nearby during the encounter. According to later reports, the men claimed they saw nothing unusual at all, despite being only a short distance away. Over the years, several theories have been proposed. Some researchers believe the Sandown figure may have been extraterrestrial in origin, pointing to the unusual anatomy, the communication device, and the impossible interior of the hut as possible clues. Others have noted similarities with Men in Black-style encounters, where witnesses describe artificial-looking figures attempting to interact with humans in awkward or unsettling ways. Skeptics have offered more grounded explanations. One suggestion is that the children experienced a shared childhood fantasy or misinterpreted an unusual situation through imagination. Another proposes that they may have encountered a local prankster wearing an elaborate costume. Interestingly, a film titled That'll Be the Day, starring Ringo Starr and David Essex, was being shot in Sandown around the same time. Some have wondered whether the children might have stumbled across a costume performer connected to the production, but even that explanation struggles to account for the strange hut, the detailed anatomy described by the children, or the remarkable consistency of Faye's story over the decades. For many years, the Sandown Clown remained a strange curiosity buried in the archives of British UFO research. But more recently, the story has experienced a revival of interest. Researchers have revisited the case, and Faye herself has spoken publicly about the encounter in later years. According to some of those later interviews, the meeting in 1973 may not have been the only time she encountered the mysterious figure known as Sam. Whether those later claims represent genuine memories or the natural evolution of a childhood story remains difficult to determine. What is certain, however, is that the Sandown Clown has taken on a life of its own. On the Isle of Wight today, the strange figure known as All Colours Sam has become something of a local legend, inspiring artwork, exhibitions, and a kind of affectionate fascination. What began as a disturbing encounter between two children and a bizarre figure in a meadow has gradually transformed into a piece of modern folklore. So what did Faye and Harry really see that afternoon in May 1973? Was it a prank, a misunderstanding, or a childhood fantasy shaped by imagination? Or did the two children genuinely encounter something that defies easy explanation? A 7-foot-tall figure dressed in bright colours. A paper white face that never moved when it spoke. a windowless hut that seemed larger on the inside, and a being who introduced himself with just 4 simple words. "I am all colours Sam." More than 50 years later, the mystery of the Sandown Clown still hasn't been solved. What do you think the children really encountered that day? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.